With Season 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds nearly upon us, I want to talk about my love-hate relationship with this show. Welcome to the Tachyon Pulse podcast.
Our Tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.
First of all, I'm going to say hate is a strong word. Let's go with love-frustration relationship with Strange New Worlds. But first of all, I'm going to talk about what I love about this show, and then I'll talk about the bits that frustrate me. Okay, there's going to be one thing I hate, and you know what it is. But get into the comments and guess now if you want, but we'll talk about that in a bit. One of my big problems with Discovery, and this is relevant, but one of my big problems with Discovery was I always felt the casting wasn't great. They're all good actors and actresses, don't get me wrong, but they didn't quite fit somehow. I didn't care about them. And that's a big problem for a TV show. You should fall in love with the characters and care what happens to them. In Strange New Worlds, I can't help but feel that it was perfectly cast. Ethan Peck, Anson Mount and beyond, they just fit the role. They're really, really likeable. Now, don't get me wrong, Captain Pike and his cooking is getting a little irritating. But that's a frustration thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But other than that, Captain Pike is, and Anson Mount's portrayal of him is lovable, warm, obviously very intense when he wants to be, funny. He's just a very interesting character. Ethan Peck's portrayal of Spock, they're really the two most important characters in this series for me, is again more interesting and lovable. Now, we're going to talk about Spock and my frustration with him again in a bit, but purely Ethan Peck's portrayal of the character and his version of the character is likeable. We have several other characters across the board, really, with the show that are just perfectly cast. And that makes you want them to do well, or feel for them when they don't, laugh with them when it's appropriate, and just know that this is a cast of, yes, very good actors, but most importantly, actors that fit the role beautifully. Also, you gotta say, the same as Discovery really, Strange New Worlds is a beautifully shot series. I love how they've got the Enterprise the way it is. Make it designed so it's supposed to look like slightly older than the original series version of the Enterprise. They couldn't do the original Enterprise the same. That's just, it would have looked weird. But so they had to make it sort of realistic within what we expect a spaceship to look like. And in line with what CGI is now capable of. But at the same time, it reminds you of the original. The way they did the bridge is exactly the same. They did it in a way that, was a little bit more modern, a little bit more in line with, what looks right on HD TV, let's be honest. But at the same time, hark back to the original. And that is, for me, very clever and very important. I do feel they did that to a point with Discovery, particularly then when Discovery then went into the future and they modernised the vessel. They did that very well. The set production and set design, etc., of all of the modern Trek series really is beautifully done. The CGI, again, I don't think they need as much as they do, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But what they do is close to cinema level quality. It's so good. I love it. Also, when they do the quirkier, funnier episodes, which frustrate me at times, but they've done one episode for me in the crossover episode with Lower Decks that is one of the best of the sort of more quirky, funny episodes of Star Trek ever. Not just New Trek, ever. They did it again, because of the characters that they've got and the way the characters are able to play with the absurdity of what was happening. And they were very, very lucky that they cast the voice casting for Lower Decks just meant that it just fit when they then swapped over to our reality. That it just worked on so many different levels. I just realised I put my mug on my keyboard. Ooh. It just worked on so many different levels and made me genuinely laugh out loud in so many parts. The Riker maneuver or Boimler speed walking. It just... I've watched an episode about 4 times. It genuinely makes me laugh out loud every single time. It's a love letter to everything that's Star Trek, and it was genius. What frustrates me about Strange New Worlds is that, yes, they have great episodes, but then they have episodes that I question. I've mentioned the musical. Do I need to talk about it again? Yes, a little bit. So the musical is one of the worst episodes of Star Trek I've ever seen. Now I'm using the word hate, and I said it's a strong word. I hate that episode. I hate it. It's cheesy. It's stupid. It makes no sense from a scientific point of view, and I know that shouldn't really matter too much, but this is science fiction. The science bit matters. They just wanted to do a musical, and they came up with some very lame excuse on how to do it. And I really, really don't like it. There are other episodes within the series as well that frustrate me a little bit. But the main thing that I think is a problem for Strange New Worlds is the villain. In this series, it's the Gorn. I don't think they're a particularly good villain. I don't think they're particularly scary in the way that they're supposed to be. Right, so they went more the alien route, making like a xenomorph scary. And and you can see in those episodes the way the Gorn are portrayed and the way they set up those very dark sort of interactions with the Gorn, that it feels like Alien. And I don't like it. I don't think it works for Star Trek, particularly when you remember that the Gorn then become part of the Federation eventually. In one of the movies, you can actually see them sat in the background and when they're at Starfleet command sort of thing, and there's all the different representatives from the Federation, and there's a Gorn sat there. How do you go from the Gorn that we see in Strange New Worlds to a Gorn that actually then joins the Federation? I don't see that bridge. I don't see it. Obviously, this is an intelligent species because they have spaceships, so you must be able to communicate with them somehow, but there are elements about how they feed and stuff, and the crimes they've committed against humanity that it would be difficult to forgive. So, the Gorn don't make sense to me, but also what's frustrating is that we don't have a villain in Strange New Worlds like the Borg or a million other villains within species like that, the Dominion or whatever, that we can actually love to hate. And that's a problem for me. I just don't see where the villain is. And I think for every great TV series, there needs to be a great villain. Or it's just a good show. And for me at the moment, Strange New Worlds is just a good show. It's not a great show because it lacks a great villain. I've argued with you guys before several times that I just think there are far too many silly, quirky episodes in this show for it to be Star Trek. I just think that, yes, okay, you might attract a different type of audience with that, and we do want new Trekkies, but it's got to be Star Trek first. TNG arrived and it attracted a new audience because the show was good. It excited the nerd. It excited the person excited about exploration and things like that. And yes, it was fun at times. Yes, it was a bit even tongue-in-cheek at times. Yes, they explored the characters. But they were never often silly. Now, we remember episodes like when Data was Sherlock Holmes and things like that, but those were 1 or 2 episodes in a 24 episode run. We're getting 2 or 3 quirky silly episodes like Spock, like in the next season the murder mystery episode and things like that are 2 or 3 episodes in a 10 episode season. That is, instead of less than 10% of the series, 30% of the series is what I would class as almost comedies. For me, that's too many. It's not enough Star Trek. There are episodes out of the 20 that we've seen so far that I don't really like. There's the Ghosts of whatever it is one. I can't even remember what it's called. I'm not watching it again. I found it boring. I don't particularly like the opener to the season. The very first episode I don't particularly like. I feel that they've tried to explore Pike's future a little bit, but it annoys me that he knows about it. That, to me, I'm just watching that episode and he sees the future and he knows what's coming. And that's, to me, just goes, oh, they're going to try and change it. And that just makes me just think, oh, for God's sake. And I think if they do decide to give Alex Kurtzman a new contract and it does go on to 6 or 7 seasons, they'll change it. They'll change the future somehow. And I hate that idea. But you never know. Okay, just quickly, Spock. Now, this is not the actor's fault. This is the writing. So it's Kurtzman's fault. But Kiefer Goldsman's fault. But what they've done with Spock, for me, in Strange New Worlds, is they've tried to accelerate the character that we saw later. So there was bits within the original series a little bit, and then the movies, and maybe in TNG a little bit as well, where Spock explored his human side. Explored what it was to be beyond just the logical Vulcan. But what we see in the original series and then again in the movies was him fighting with that Vulcan side and trying to embrace it but failing in lots of ways. What they've done in Strange New Worlds is accelerate that. We've already seen him as a human. A very funny episode. Really funny episode. But didn't feel right for the character. So what they've done really, I think, is they've not necessarily changed the Spock character, which a lot of people will argue that they did. But what they've done is they've taken a lifetime of Spock and accelerated it and squeezed it into a series of events that happened before the events that we saw later in the original series, and etc. I find that a little frustrating. As I say, it's not necessarily a bad thing that we get to explore this character in a different way. It's just frustrating when you consider the timeline and the canon, etc., of how that fits in what we already know about the character. He was never going to be Leonard Nimoy, but actually, he does fill the shoes relatively well. I just wish they'd not done what they've done with the character, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Strange New Worlds, Season 3. Looking forward to it. Another couple of quirky episodes. Hopefully it's just the 2 that we've seen. The one where the crew turn Vulcans and the murder mystery. Hopefully we might get a conclusion to the Gorn. And hey, you never know, maybe we'll get a new villain. If we do, hopefully this series can catapult itself up into that great category. Let's see what happens. Great cast. Beautifully made. I'm frustrated by bits. But will I be looking forward and watching Season 3? Oh, hell yeah. But guys, get into the comments, tell me what you think. I know there are people out there that hate Strange New Worlds, and I know there are people out there that love it. I mean, they think it's the best Star Trek ever made. And there's a chunk of us in between. Where would you class yourself? And what do you think, if Strange New Worlds isn't quite great just yet, what does it need to get just to that next level? Get into the comments and tell me exactly what you think. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification. It really helps us out and you'll never miss any of our new videos. Also, you can become a member of the channel and get to see a lot of these videos up to 24 hours before everybody else. You lucky bunnies. So, please check that out. As always, please stay safe and I'll see you next time.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.